son Kai after school officials refused to do anything about his being bullied. Homeschooling is legal in Norway, but Mike Donnelly of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association says authorities don't like it, and they went after Kai.
And so they came into the neighborhood without any warning, and he didn't want to go with them, and so he ran away from the police. They chased him down. Video shows they tackled him in the snow. He obviously didn't want to go with them, but they took him.
After 2 weeks, Donnelly says Kai is back home with his parents thanks to HSLDA getting involved.
HSLDA had initiated a petition. We got tens of thousands of signatures on it and made thousands of contacts with the Norwegian embassy and to the Ministry of Welfare in Norway, demanding that they return Kai Christensen to his parents, Teresa and Leif.
Donnelly explains a stipulation for his return is that Kai will have to attend a public school, but he will be going to a different one where he hopefully will not be bullied. I'm Bob Kellogg.
U.S. economic growth has been revised down slightly to a still solid 2.5% rate in the final 3 months of last year. American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. And you know, there's almost nothing as wholesome and basic to American culture as a good cup of coffee. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is always patient, love will blow your mind.
I realize that, but the question is, enough. I think this speaks to bigger questions of our culture. What are we teaching our kids? Look at the violence in our culture. Look at what they're getting as far as a culture that's providing them. There's bigger questions here than a narrow law. What about law enforcement? What about school resource officers? What about the FBI? What about background checks? Those are all things that we have to get lots of answers to. At the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, we also have to ask ourselves about the kind of culture that's creating these kinds of people. And then, do we have the kind of mental health laws that we need in the books? Again, we passed overhaul of the entire mental health system. The question is, are we making sure that that overhaul is doing what it's supposed to be doing to making sure that people who are like this do not get those kinds of guns? That's where we should focus our problem to be solved, which is the people who shouldn't get guns without trying to take away a citizen's rights.
Wow. Welcome to the program. It's Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. So glad to be with you today. It's hump day, halfway through the week, and yeah, we're energized about it. I'm so glad that we have another opportunity to discuss issues and get all of this stuff, the truth, out in front of you for you to hear and listen to and watch on our many different avenues of watching and listening to the program. The call lines are open at 866-963-2037. And today on the program, we have some fantastic guests. We are going to be speaking with Aaron Mate of The Real News. And then, second hour, we have Bill Powell. He's a senior Washington correspondent for Newsweek. He's joining the program. We're going to be talking with him about the latest sanctions in North Korea, which is important. And what you just heard just now coming in at the top of the hour was Paul Ryan standing up for not taking gun rights away from American citizens. And so I want to be on the record on this program because I was just recently on Cam and Company on NRA TV just a couple of minutes ago, and you can catch that live later. It's going to be, there will be a replay on your Roku, all of those different channels available to you, NRA TV. And I was on there and I made a point. He asked me if I felt, since the shooting in Parkland, any sense of shame or maybe rethought my support of the NRA or my NRA membership. And I don't. I haven't had any of that. I did spend some time reflecting on whether or not I was in the right position supporting the Second Amendment, whether or not it comports with Christian values which those are supposed to supersede. That's who you are first. And I am firmly of the belief that it is right and just to support the Constitution, to support the Second Amendment, which ensures the First Amendment, and that being a member of the NRA does not make me culpable in any of these heinous attacks that are perpetrated by individuals who are already breaking the law. So I want to be clear about that here on this program, just in case you're wondering. Absolutely, I'm an NRA member. I also work with the organization on advocacy on a paid and unpaid basis, and I'm absolutely, positively thrilled with continuing my membership and continuing to support and advocate for those things. It doesn't make me bloodthirsty. It doesn't make me culpable in anything that has occurred. What it does mean is that I have access to the training that they provide. I have access to the information that they provide. And I'm a member of an organization that lobbies on behalf of the Second Amendment. That's all it means. So if you're surrounded by people, or if you have people in your sphere who are coming at you with this idea that somehow the NRA had something to do with Parkland or any of the other shootings, that is a distraction. And so you shouldn't allow yourself to be drawn into that. Instead, you can calmly and cogently share that whether or not you're an NRA member doesn't have anything to do with the choices that are made by other individuals. You know, Nicholas Cruz had a lot going on with him that was wrong. He had a lot of things that he was engaging in for years, mutilating toads, killing, animals on other people's property, enjoying the suffering of small animals. He really had it was just a lot of evil activities going on full display for everyone in his community, and everyone was concerned about him. Latest report out is a lady, this was on CNN, but the audio was not good, so I didn't bring it forward for the show today, but this woman was interviewed. She's a neighbor of the Cruz family before the mom passed away of pneumonia from the flu last fall. And at one point, because she knew he was going to be 18 and he could legally purchase a firearm, she and her family had actually planned to move out of the neighborhood because they were so disgusted by him and afraid of him. And then, of course, events occurred and transpired. You know, the mom passed away of the flu and the family moved out of the neighborhood, and so they didn't have to move. But she was telling the CNN reporter that they knew he had a problem years on end. This kid was an issue. Spearing toads in their yard, and then he would dissect them. Now, obviously, dissecting a frog is a part of, I think, 8th grade science or 7th grade science. There's nothing wrong with that. But in the proper context, most children don't go find a live animal and dissect it. Most children don't see your dog in distress and gleefully kind of, watch it the way I watch home and garden television. It's not the same thing. There were a lot of problems with this kid. And so do those problems translate into somehow morphing into the convenient scapegoating of the NRA? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I think if you're engaging in that, if you feel like this is a good time to pile on to the NRA, check yourself. Understand why you're doing that, because you don't want to deal with the failure of the government. The government here is really, it's not a scapegoat. They're culpable. They're responsible. That's why Sheriff Israel is out there doing his mega, PR campaign. I've never seen a sheriff go on that many interviews that wasn't an actual pundit. Like, he's been on TV nonstop for the past couple of weeks since the shooting. And everything he's saying is pure poppycock. Like, there's just no other way to describe all the lying that he's doing. So why would he be doing that? Just don't take it as NRA this or against the NRA that. Why would Sheriff Israel be out doing all of these media hits, explaining himself over and over and over again and changing his story over and over and over again? Remember, earlier this week, I said between 23 and 39 visits. Now, again, the reporters are digging, they're scraping, they're going into all the different little rabbit holes looking for information. Now the number's 45 police contacts with the Cruz family, and no reports filed as in we arrested him, we brought him in, we questioned him. It's all, they come out to the house, and then the mom who calls the police on the kid, she actually enabled him by when the police would arrive, she'd say, well, I don't know if he really did what we think he did, or well, he didn't really do it. So there's a lot of blame to go around, but nowhere in that circle of complicity can you find the National Rifle Association. So now I want to pivot over to some breaking news from last night that is a developing story today. Over a dozen people were sickened by a piece of mail that was opened at Joint Base in Virginia. It's a joint military base, so Marines and other armed services all located on the same base in Arlington, Virginia. A piece of mail opened, and people were immediately sickened, some of them to the degree that they had to be hospitalized. So I want to listen to that audio. It's number 6.
What we are hearing is that 11 people felt ill after some type of letter was opened at an administrative building at this military base. Of the 11 who felt ill, 3 were transported to the hospital, and at this hour, the local fire department is saying that all 3 of those people are in stable condition. Even as you can see there, emergency personnel continue to remain on the scene, trying to determine exactly what happened at Joint Base Fort Myer Henderson Hall. This is a local military installation here in Washington, D.C. Basically, it's just a short walk, if you will, away from the Pentagon here near Arlington National Cemetery on the Virginia side of the Potomac River. It is a major location here in the area. There are a number of various kinds of military units and personnel that are based there and serve there for local reasons here in the area. These are not combat forces in Washington, D.C. They perform local functions here in the area. And some type of letter was opened and people began to feel ill. What we don't know is exactly what's transpired here. They're going to have to test it, see what substance may have been involved and what is causing the symptoms. The initial information we had was that 3 people had symptoms, including burning hands and 1 bloody nose, so taken to the hospital for medical attention. Local fire is on the scene. We were told a short time ago, FBI personnel also monitoring it.
Wow. So whatever it was that was in the envelope burned the hands of the individuals who handled it. One person had a nosebleed from breathing in whatever was released when the envelope was opened, and others were sickened. We have no other news besides that. I read up on it a little bit this morning, and I didn't see any. The FBI is now involved, obviously, but there's no statements on whether or not there's some terrorism involved, domestic terrorism. They haven't disclosed who the return addressee was, if there was one, or how the piece of mail was delivered, whether it was through the regular delivery of, in interoffice mail, or if it was something delivered by FedEx or UPS. I'm assuming on a joint base. I don't know if the procedures are the same as when I was on active duty, but all of the mail went someplace central and then was distributed from there. So you have to kind of wonder what was the consistency of the envelope? Was it something that was so thin they couldn't feel the powder inside? Was it a powder? Was it, a smell that sickened them? Because I guess it could have been dipped in something. So it's a really, it's a kind of a crazy story, and it's developing. So we will definitely check back in with that as we know more. So I want to kind of go on to some breaking news from PBS. And we are going to be weaving in and out of the story. Obviously, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Parkland shooting and developing things with that. And we're going to be talking also, I want to give you a little preview for hour 2. We're going to be discussing the illegals voting in Illinois and California. You're probably thinking, oh, come on with that again. Come on, we don't have any proof that illegals are voting. And we do. We actually do. True the Vote has proof. There's a reason why the president launched that commission into voter integrity that was roundly opposed by governors, even Republican governors, which I don't understand that at all. But there's a reason why the Democrats want illegal aliens to vote. And now they're being open about it, which in some ways that's good news. In other ways, it's bad news because we know they have a number of people in positions of power on benches across the country on appellate courts that will enshrine their right to this illegal behavior into law. So we've got to put a stop to it. And the federal government should be able to do that. But we're now seeing even the Supreme Court stepping back from addressing issues that they should adjudicate. They're refusing to hear cases like on the DACA. That was a story yesterday, and we'll get into that as well, because all these things dovetail in together with the lawlessness that elected politicians in some states like Illinois and California are trying to bring to Americans. So here's this other bit of news, which I think is pretty interesting. PBS, yes, I said it, gird your loins. PBS is launching a conservative talk show featuring serious discussions led by Amy Holmes and Washington Post columnist Michael Gerson. Guys, Amy Holmes has been on this show before. She is previously of The Blaze. In fact, I went on her show back when it was broadcast out of New York, and The Blaze, when it was Glenn Beck's big, huge TV network, and he still had an office in New York. I went out and did the Real News, and it was a panel of 5 people, but the regular hosts were Amy Holmes and a couple of other people. And I did the show from back then, and I think that was like 4 or 5 years ago, before The Blaze really had their huge studio down in Dallas, Texas. Now The Blaze is, there's been a bid for a conservative organization. The Daily Wire is actually bidding to purchase The Blaze from Glenn Beck because it has largely, the hosts have gone elsewhere. And so they don't have full 24-hour programming or even day programming for prime time from, like news in the morning, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. They don't have that going on. So it's, people are looking at it and they want to purchase, different people are making offers. So the AP is reporting that columnist Michael Gerson and commentator Amy Holmes are teaming up to start a conservative-oriented talk show on PBS. It's going to take its cue from William F. Buckley's Firing Line, which aired from 1966 to 1999. And that was a serious show. Like that, they didn't have any, there were no nincompoops on that program. So I'm interested to see who they're going to have. It's called In Principle. It will air Friday nights starting April 13th. And they'll decide after an 8-week run whether or not it will continue. And the hosts plan to interview 2 guests per show. Kind of like this show. All right. We will have more. In fact, we'll see if we can get Amy on to talk about their new project sometime in the close future. But right now, I hear the music. We'll be back with more right after these messages. StacyOnTheRight.com. Check it out.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We still have seats available for our September tours, Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg. Washington, D.C. and Mount Vernon, that's one tour. And then Williamsburg, Jamestown, and Yorktown, that is a separate tour. Now, we put them back to back so you can do both. If you're flying in from Texas or Montana or California or wherever you may be coming from, so that you can do those tours back to back with us if that's something you so choose to do. Now, Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation will be with us all along the way as our historian. Stephen will add context, he'll answer questions, talk about the people, the places, the events that make up our early American history. So for more information on this Spiritual Heritage Tour, go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. spiritualheritagetours.com for the September tour information.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. Not all prayers capture God's attention. When our children were small, Karen and I learned to distinguish the sounds they made. For example, often they were playing in another room and there were pleasant sounds of laughter or conversation. We didn't pay much attention to those sounds. However, there was one discernible sound that grabbed our attention. The sounds that says, I need some intervention. That is sort of the way it is with meaningful prayer, effective prayer. All meaningful, effective prayer is an intentional cry for help. The goal of prayer is God's intervention on our behalf. Let me underscore that again. The goal of prayer is God's intervention, His coming alongside, coming down, identifying with our situation, and making His presence known. He wants to intervene on our behalf. So we're praying, God, I need you to intervene. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 18 and 19 says, with all prayer and petition, pray at all times in the Spirit, and with this in view, be on the alert with all perseverance and petition for all the saints, and pray on my behalf that utterance may be given to me in the opening of my mouth to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel. Here the Apostle Paul frames prayer by saying effective praying means we're filled and directed by the Holy Spirit and we're alert in prayer. Effective praying also honors God's purposes. Paul says, please pray for me. Pray for the spread of the gospel. We need God's supernatural intervention. Let the Spirit of God guide you. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. The goal of prayer is to capture God's attention and to have Him intervene on our behalf. Let's examine our hearts. Let's take prayer seriously.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. While we're working on getting our guest, I want to give you guys a little bit more info on that. I just love it when they try something new, and I hope they really give it a full opportunity. And I'm referring to the story that we were just covering at the end of last segment, where I was talking about this new show with Amy Holmes and Washington Post columnist Michael Gerson. So neither Amy or Michael Gerson are, super Trump advocates. So that should make the show pretty interesting and palatable to moderate viewers. But it should also be fine to have some conservative programming on mainstream TV. And I'm talking about PBS, which is coincidentally funded by taxpayers, some of whom happen to be conservatives, Republicans, people on the right, politically agnostic and moderates, not just liberals. So it would be great to have this show not just take off for the 8 weeks, but get picked up permanently and be a fixture on PBS, because we need this kind of programming. That's why. That's my my feeling on the thing. So now we can talk to our guest. We have Aaron Mate, host and producer with The Real News and contributor to The Nation. Aaron, thanks for coming on today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Demetrius didn't say what we're discussing. So, news of the day. You want to start off with Parkland? What do you think is going to happen with the Broward County Sheriff's Department? Are they going to be held accountable for their failures and the shooting, or do you think they're going to get away scot-free?
Well, I mean, what do we know about the track record for holding police accountable in this country? It's not very promising. Generally, when police officers commit abuses or mistakes, they usually get off scot-free, so I'm not too optimistic.
But mistakes of this magnitude with 17 people dead and clear dereliction of duty with the officers not going in, and, numerous mistakes on not arresting this kid, not prosecuting him, et cetera, et cetera.
I got it. I'm not, obviously, no argument that there wasn't dereliction, but just looking at the track record that we've seen across the country, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, cases of widespread police misconduct with the Baltimore police forces across the country. Just generally, the trend is that police officers don't see accountability. But obviously, anybody observing what happened there, missing multiple tips. And by the way, it's not just the local police, it's the FBI as well. The FBI received at least 2 tips about the shooter, but didn't properly follow up. Maybe that will change this time, but, I don't see a very promising track record of accountability.
So I wanted to get your opinion on the discussion so since the shootings, with all of the information that we have that's been shared, and investigative reporting that's been done that's exposed all of these different governmental failures, the FBI included. I've talked about all of the different avenues and ways in which government failed this community and the victims of the shooter. Do you see the discussion ever moving away from the distraction tactics of discussing the NRA and kind of going to the heart of the matter, which is hardening schools and figuring out how to get our mental health apparatus up to where it needs to be?
You see the NRA discussion as a distraction?
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, tell me how the NRA was involved in the shooting that Nicholas Cruz committed on that fateful day. How was the NRA involved? Was he an NRA member?
No, but the NRA is played a huge role in fighting against sensible gun control that could have prevented the shooting. So I don't see how one can call them a distraction. They spend millions of dollars every single year lobbying.
$873,000 in the 2016 cycle to individual politicians.
Okay, but then you have to figure also in PAC money and other ways that gun money is funneled to candidates.
Still a fraction of what others spend. Like George Soros spends hundreds of millions of dollars, and we never hear discussions about the impacts, the negative impacts that his money is having on politics. It's not illegal for PACs to donate money to.
What do you think? What do you think? What has killed more people in the U.S.? George Soros or guns?
Well, again, I'm still not seeing a connection between political advocacy on behalf of the Second Amendment and what happened with Nicholas Cruz, who was clearly a problem in his community and was reported to the police and the FBI, and nothing was done. And I still don't see how that connects back to the NRA.
Well, again, if the NRA is lobbying against, I'm not talking about the Second Amendment. We can debate that, but there is at least even people who favor the Second Amendment. There are many people who agree that there should be some sensible gun control. Like, for example, we shouldn't have military-style assault weapons on the streets,
like
the one that was available to Nicholas Cruz.
Let's
and it's the NRA that has lobbied extensively to ensure that there's no curb to that. So it's not just about.
Okay,
it's not about the Second Amendment.
Let's discuss this in facts, because you said a few things there that are not factual. So first of all, an AR-15 is not a military-style weapon because military weapons have higher firing capacity, and some of them are automatic. And an AR-15 is a semi-automatic rifle that is no different than a semi-automatic rifle that's used for hunting. So the only thing that makes it, as you call it, an assault weapon is the fact that it has a stock and a grip on the front that enables you to hold it differently than a regular hunting rifle. So if you own a shotgun and you own an AR-15, both of them have the same killing capacity. So that's the first thing. And the second thing, you keep saying that we need common sense gun control. So you're looking for new laws, and the NRA opposes that. So my question for you is, what new law would have prevented Nicholas Cruz from doing the shooting that he did? Because it's already illegal to kill people. It's already illegal to go into schools and carry a firearm. What new law would have prevented the Parkland shooting?
We should have had the assault weapons ban preserved instead of being repealed.
So if the assault weapons ban had been in place, he could have just bought a regular shotgun and done the same killing.
Okay, and at least with a regular shotgun, that has less capacity to kill people than an AR-15.
No,
I mean,
any person who's adept at using a shotgun, first of all, you can get a double-barrel shotgun with loading 3 into each one, and then if you're adept at using it, you can reload and have pretty much the identical. Watch on YouTube. There are people who they train so that they can shoot at the same rate of speed with different kinds of weapons. And if it was an assault weapons ban, but it didn't include the M4, again, moot point. So the only ban that would have prevented him from accessing a long gun would have been that semi-automatic would have been a ban on all semi-automatic weapons, which includes all handguns that aren't pistols. So I'm still waiting for, because and even if they were illegal, he could have gotten one on the black market. So criminals don't actually pay attention to gun laws. Only law-abiding citizens like myself do. So how does that work?
Except he didn't get it on the black market, and
no, he didn't.
Personally,
but he could have.
If it would prevent the killing of children, I'd be all for a ban on all weapons that can kill children like this.
Don't go emotional on me.
No, it's true. It's just true.
Please keep the conversation in the realm of, because you're obviously in the media and you're coming on the program to discuss this. I have children. I'm a mom. I'm an NRA member. And if we want to be emotional about it, I'm wondering why you only want to disarm women like me, where I'm not as strong as a man. and I need access to AR-15s because they're easier for me to fire. I'm wondering why you want to disarm me, but you're not concerned with disarming criminals.
That's really interesting. You're accusing me of being emotional, and then you're appealing.
You went to the emotional appeal.
I went to the fact. I went to the fact. And it's
not a fact
that children were killed.
No, it's not a fact that if you oppose gun control that you don't care about children. No, I'm talking about what you actually said. You said you're in favor of common sense gun laws to protect children. But in that same breath, you're advocating for gun control, which would disarm me and expose my children to people who have threatened to kill me and to come into my home and rape me and my daughters. So either you want to defend all children or you're just excluding mine.
I get it.
Are my children not important to you? You don't want them
really
protected?
I get
Is it
you
because
feel
we're
really
black?
Strongly that. Oh, give me a break.
Well, you're
you
doing
feel
an
really
emotional
strongly.
appeal. I think if we're going to be emotional, then let's be emotional. Everybody gets to be emotional. Or we can just have a cut and dry discussion about common sense, as you call them, gun laws. Which gun laws would have prevented the Parkland shooting and so many other shootings that have occurred? The assault weapons ban wouldn't have done it. Do you have another one?
An assault weapons ban would have prevented him from buying an AR-15, and
so he could have bought a different firearm.
Excuse me. If you feel as if your safety or your sense of safety for defending yourself from a potential attack is more important than preventing people like him from getting those weapons, and I don't know what to tell you. Okay, like that's
another veiled insult and emotional appeal. I'm only looking for you to tell me what. So if it's the assault weapons ban, that's your assertion. That's been debunked. There are plenty of articles written by experts far more knowledgeable than myself who have debunked the idea that the assault weapons ban disarmed criminals. It disarmed Americans who are law-abiding. People who actually care about getting arrested and going to prison. But repeat offenders and individuals who are already felons do not pay attention to weapons bans. Now, in this case, we're talking about a kid who he didn't have a criminal history because of the dereliction of duty of the government. And so he was not a prohibited possessor. He bought a firearm. You're saying an assault weapons ban would have prevented him from purchasing an AR-15. But it wouldn't have prevented him from purchasing a shotgun or from doing any other kind of attack on the school with bombs or anything else. And so I'm trying to figure out how we get to a place where
I'm very comfortable. I'm very comfortable asserting the fact that we agree on that an assault weapons ban would have prevented him from buying the weapon he used to kill all those people. Let's agree on that. You're saying that it's irrelevant because he could have bought something else.
He would have.
I'm saying he could have not bought the. Excuse me. I'm saying he could have not bought the gun that he used to kill those people.
And then,
by the way, I didn't realize I was coming out here to talk gun control. I write about Russiagate, and that's what I thought we were here to discuss.
Oh,
so
well, that wasn't
you're actually
okay.
kind of bombarding me with this.
That's not on the list of discussion.
It's
so
not.
If you're not comfortable discussing this,
you want to bring out a random guest.
Absolutely not. I said news of the day,
which is fine.
If you don't feel comfortable discussing this and you'd like to discuss Russiagate, that's perfectly fine. We can pivot to that discussion right this moment. Or, I mean, it's up to you. You're not a hostage here. I do think you sound upset.
That's true. Let me also say, listen, there's it's not just about banning weapons. There also should be whatever can be done to improve screening of mentally ill people who buy weapons. I think we can all agree on that. But, again, it's the NRA and it's Trump. Trump actually signed legislation that would have made it harder for people with mental issues to buy weapons. So, it's like that's if NRA people are really so against banning military assault weapons, maybe they could at least support measures that would make it harder for troubled people to purchase them.
Maybe people who advocate for gun control would like to hold government officials accountable for actually prosecuting and going after people like Nicholas Cruz, who are completely troubled and clearly have exhibited red flags that would have prevented the shooting. And maybe also, in addition to that, people who care about children would be more interested in the discussions about hardening schools. Excuse me. You should be concerned about hardening schools and spending money to make sure that kids are safe in those buildings as well. And you haven't mentioned that at all because you're obsessed with the NRA.
Stacy, do you seriously think that Nicholas Cruz would have not committed the massacre if he had considered more that there was a stiffer penalty awaiting him by prosecutors?
So you make my point. Finally. Okay, so the same thing that you just said about him being worried about stiffer prosecutions applies to him not being able to purchase an AR-15. He would have simply purchased another firearm. Finally, some agreement. So there you go.
He would have, yes, I'm all for not giving him the right to purchase a assault weapon that can kill more people than other firearms. Personally, if it's up to me, I don't think that people should have the right to kill, to purchase weapons that can kill people easily. I just don't.
Have you ever fired a military-grade weapon?
I certainly have not. No,
so I have. I have, because I'm a veteran. So I have fired a military-grade weapon.
Okay.
And then I own an AR-15 and a number of other weapons.
Okay.
And I fired them as well. And so I just think over and over again during this conversation, you've mentioned military-grade weapons, but you have no idea what those are. You're using terms that are, these are widely accepted in the media, but they don't actually have a definitive meaning when it comes to comparing an M60, let's say, to an AR-15. Okay. So if you haven't done that, how can you possibly make these blanket statements?
You know what? Why don't you, instead of ambushing a random
I'm not ambushing you. And I'm sorry that you're upset by this. And I do think it's sad that you're kind of doing a lot of emotional appeals here.
One of these children.
So, yeah.
Get on the parent of one of these children and make your case for them.
I think you should just fire a military-grade weapon. It's easy to get your hands on one and try it out at a range and then talk about it. Thank you for coming on. All right. I'm going to obviously send Demetrius a text about this guest, but it was good to talk to him. So we'll be back with more right after these messages. Thanks for being here.
I just thank God for the Holy Ghost. If you will let him, he really will teach you all things. Have you ever made an excuse to someone why you were unable to do something or why you couldn't attend a certain event instead of just being honest and telling them you just were not interested? I think many of us have. Well, that's lying. Proverbs chapter 12 verse 17 says, an honest witness tells the truth. A false witness tells lies. Proverbs chapter 11 verse 1 in one translation says, dishonesty in business disgusts the eternal. It disgusts God. But fair dealing delights him. False witness utters lies. Be faithful and consistent with being honest with others. Stop with the excuses and be truthful. There is freedom when our integrity and character reflects our Savior Jesus Christ. What seems little to us are big to him. With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Victory McIntosh. Connect with us more at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Listen to Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left. Just kept popping into my mind.
Stacy on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk.
When I hear the president saying, you just have to respect the flag, well, you kind of don't.
Stacy Washington.
So I respect the symbols of this nation. I would never burn a flag. I do believe that they're not sacred, but they are important to us in our national identity. He could say, I feel like I have to respect it, or I feel like I don't respect people who don't respect it. But to say that you have to is not exactly accurate.
Stacy on the Right. Weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk.
And my father, your great-grandfather, fought in World War II.
Really?
He was a gunner on the big ship out in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Your great-grandmother did her part, too.
Was she on a ship?
Oh no, she stayed back home. She and a lot of her friends worked really hard in a factory because the men had gone off to war.
Ooh.
And they held scrap metal drives to help in the war effort. The folks back home were heroes too.
Here at the American Family Association, we consider you the heroes back home. As you fulfill your responsibility of caring for your family day to day, your partnership with us is crucial as we fight the enemies of freedom in America. Thank you for your commitment to the American Family Association.
Grandpa, what's a scrap metal drive?
Let's get some cookies, and I'll tell you all about it.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Gabriel Alwyn was coming to work around 6 a.m. when he saw what happened to another worker doing the same.
The gate was locked, so I sit out here on the street. And it's pitch dark, and you got to watch for carjackers.
Alwyn says a silver SUV pulled in behind the worker parking at the Milwaukee Machine Tool business. One robber got out of the SUV and approached the car. Inside was a 24-year-old man who took his own gun out and shot and killed the would-be carjacker. The witness says the SUV with others inside took off.
It's really dark over here and early in the morning, so yeah, it makes you a little nervous and scared now to come in to work that early.
Leah Williams works at a nearby daycare and is concerned about what happened.
He was protecting himself, basically.
You got to watch out for stuff like that. If not, you're a victim, and we're not trying to be victims.
Alwyn says those who work in the area are very aware that groups of carjackers have been targeting people going to work early in the morning in businesses. He drives with tinted windows as protection.
I don't want a carjacker to run up on my car and know if there's one person in it or 5 dudes with AK-47s. I mean, I want to be just as, I don't want to be a target. So when I tell the officer my windows are pitch black, not because I just like tinted windows, it's to save my life.
Alwyn says many workers in the area carry guns.
I think everybody here pretty much carries. We got guys that carry here. So, and I've even told them when we park and we're in here waiting, I might put it right on your lap. Keep it right on your lap, and we face the gate, we back in so our fronts are facing the only gate open. I mean, everything is conscious of what's going on in this area.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. I actually didn't realize that the guest was not prepared to talk news of the day, which one of those items is the Parkland shooting. And I think, when called on to disagree, sometimes that can be really difficult. And so I have been in that position before where I was asked a question and I wasn't sure if that was a part of what we were going to discuss in the interview. I've done thousands of radio and TV interviews. And so I kind of commiserate with him a little bit, but it's not good form, whether you're expecting the question or not, to become emotional. And this discussion, we don't need emotions to be running high during the discussion about how to protect kids. There are so many ways that we can go about protecting kids. And one of those ways is to acknowledge the fact that gun ownership is a reality in this country, and 360 some odd million guns, which is what we know. That's what we know are in this country. That doesn't include the guns on the illegal market, and it doesn't include the private sales, et cetera. That means that this is a reality for us. And so bans aren't the answer. It's already illegal to kill people. It's already illegal to possess a gun if you're mentally ill. These things are already illegal. And as he said, you can't mitigate those things by simply passing more laws. And the Bible even talks about that. The laws are for the just. They're the ones who pay attention to it. The consequences are for the people who break the laws. So anyway, I want to go to the phones because we have someone who's called in. And then we'll discuss, we can circle back around to that audio we just heard about people defending themselves with semi-automatic firearms, pistols in their cars against carjackers, resulting in a carjacker being killed. But right now I want to go to someone who's just called in, Roy from Florida. Hey, thanks for calling into the show.
Hi, Stacy. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I called because I try to catch your show every day. I'm a big fan. And the reason I called in today is because I actually am from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I actually was born and raised in Broward County, which is where Parkland is located. Mm-hmm. And with all the discussion of, gun laws and the protests and this and that, I just find it so bizarre. Well, not really, because if you live down in Broward County, you realize where political lines fall and political affiliation falls. And with regards to the shooting, it's strange to me that no one is talking about. Well, they know about it, but they deflect to something else because they don't want to accept the fact that the government dropped the ball, that the FBI was warned, that our local Broward Sheriff's Office was warned multiple times, and they did nothing about it, especially Scott Israel. And if you live in Broward, or if you watched the news about a year ago, the whole Fort Lauderdale International Airport shooting that occurred, where 5 to 6 people, I believe, died, was also on Scott Israel's watch. And
forgot about
once
that.
again,
Man.
it doesn't seem to, it doesn't, it no one seems to be talking about the incompetence of the people in place and the laws in place that are there to protect us, and they're not. Scott Israel is a sworn officer of the law, and this is his second scandal, so to speak, in the course of maybe a year, if not 2. And he just does not want to take responsibility, which is a big key that I feel that nobody really has anymore, especially not our politicians, not anybody in government wants to take responsibility for their actions. And truth be told, that's a big part of his issue, on top of the fact that he just dropped the ball, and he doesn't want to cop for it. And 2, and you really have to go start listening to independent journalism to find this out. But back in 2012, him and our current Broward County Superintendent of Schools formed this Promise program under President Obama, to where they basically went into agreement that they weren't going to start basically reporting certain crimes done by either students or minors, in a sense so they could lower the crime rate and they could collect more federal money, federal grants.
Yeah,
and
I saw that
it was in our local
the Last
paper.
Refuge. Yeah, so Roy, you're dead on.
So,
your assessments are dead on, and I think one of the interesting things about what you've said is that so you're a resident of Broward County. You actually have the kind of you're on the ground there, and you remember. So just like I remember stuff about here, and when Ferguson jumped off and different protests we've had here. If you're local to the area, this story about the airport shooting and the 6 people who were killed, that's still fresh in your mind. Nationally speaking, we've had so many other mass shootings and things that have happened, terror attacks, that it kind of pushes it down in our memory banks. But shouldn't Sheriff Israel have been held accountable then, which would have prevented him from overseeing the Parkland shooting? Like you would hope, a new sheriff would have come in and kind of then all of these additional calls out to the Cruz residents, and then maybe he would have said, we got to do something about it, but maybe not, because as you say, over at the Last Refuge, a conservative treehouse, they had Twitter threads and they've had a post that I covered here on the show where they talked about what you're describing here, the Promise program, which I connect back to electing a president who was pretty lawless, which was President Obama. You're connecting all the dots, and this is what I don't understand about the discussion centering on the NRA. Sure, we could talk about the NRA all day. We could talk about new laws all day. But what about what actually happened? Because the NRA was in existence well before the Broward shooting, and it's going to be in existence now that that's happened. But what about Broward County itself and the failures there? People don't seem willing to really focus on it.
Well, and I agree. And the problem with that, Stacy, is a lot of, and I don't like to use the term left or right or blue or red or whatever. Mm-hmm. But Broward County is a solid blue state. Our mayor is an elected Democrat. Our congresswoman is Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Oh,
she is Broward County's. So if you start piecing the things together, and then also too, people don't realize. And once again, I believe in the old adage of the company you keep. And Scott Israel campaigned for Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at those two personalities of taking responsibility for one's actions, there is none. And I truly believe that we are in such a down in Broward County, at least, and from my experience, a cesspool of corruption and turning the other way and just a total void of right and wrong as far as our voters are concerned, that this is what's happened. I myself have called the governor's office to tell him, Scott Israel, this is strike two. He needs to walk away. He needs to resign. You need to look into this. Mm-hmm. And it seems to go nowhere. Now, it seems to me it was on the other foot, had this been a sheriff that possibly was a conservative or a Republican, and I don't want to, seem, hypocritical. He would have been gone within the week.
I got you.
Because
I understand
the
what you're saying.
would have been.
Yeah, it would have been enormous. They've even tried to call out Governor Scott because he's a Republican and say it's really his fault, not Sheriff Israel's, that this whole thing went down. But I just don't see how that works because he's the governor and he's not actually tasked with arresting people. He's running the state, the state government, and Sheriff Israel's on the ground. And it just one arrest and prosecution for anything that he was purported to have done, attacking people, assault with, chairs. He would throw desks at people in school. He actually assaulted parents. He mutilated animals. I mean, there are so many statutes out there, so many laws. Someone could have gotten him on any one of those things and it would have made him unable to purchase a firearm, but nobody did. So it just, I have to say I appreciate your call because you've given some perspective here from someone who's local to the area that we didn't have before now. And I just think your whole call illustrates how important it is that we don't waste time talking about the NRA. And I understand people don't all support the NRA, and you don't have to. No one has to support it. But I'm just saying when we talk about who's responsible, it's a waste of time to make it about the NRA.
Well, and I totally agree. And sadly to say, and especially because of who they're putting out there to talk about, and they focus on just the NRA. And just because I try to educate myself as much as I can, and just the fact that they were presenting and blame the NRA were completely untrue. Mm. And after about a week of this, I myself, I do not like guns. I'm definitely afraid of them. I've tried to educate myself as much as possible as far as going to a shooting gallery with a current police officer down here. And I still am not comfortable on it. But as of last Wednesday, I am now officially an NRA member because I believe in the Second Amendment, and I believe that, especially from being down here and the false narrative that they're pushing out there and the hiding of facts and not reporting of facts, this is a politicized agenda. This is a political move to only hurt people that follow the laws. Gunners that follow the laws and know what's right and wrong. And once again, down here in Broward, people do not understand it. People do not have the concept of right or wrong or taking personal responsibility for your actions. But then again, down here, all of our politicians have been in numerous scandals, and it's always somebody else's fault.
Wow.
So.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I have to say, first of all, welcome to the club. If you just joined the NRA, and you'll find that there's a lot of training and a lot of resources that are available to you now that can help you along the path. And whether or not you ever become a gun owner, because it's a personal choice and it's a comfort level, I applaud you for giving the organization a chance with a yearly membership and just checking it out. And I think you'll find that there are a lot of people who are really, really interested in safety and in kind of, fellowship and working together to keep kids safe, to keep neighborhoods safe, to, empower women to keep themselves safe. And I think you're going to enjoy it, especially the publications. I found that they don't make, none of the magazines are bad. They're all excellent. And they have great articles in them. And I'm really happy that you shared that on the show. Thank you for calling today and for listening. And for also joining the NRA. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Roy. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks for your time, Stacy.
Sure,
I appreciate it.
No problem. That was really cool that she called and shared that with us. And I just think, as much as I want to have a discussion about firearms ownership, and I'm always open to it. You know, when I was talking about being in the car with the driver and in Indianapolis, and we had quite a drive. I think it was like 38 minutes from where we were down to the studio to do the hit on Fox Business. I just find that they lack the ability to not veer into emotions. And I don't know if Aaron Mate has kids or not. I know he said he has never fired a military grade weapon. But I do have kids, and I have had people threaten us and threaten our personal safety. And I am absolutely serious when I say that none of it was fake. I've had private investigators look into it. I've had law enforcement contacted. I've contacted law enforcement. It's real. And so, you know, there's no argument that Aaron can make that would cause me to agree with banning weapons, because I need access to whatever is available, my choice, because that's my right as an American citizen. And I actually went overseas and fought for that right. I served this country. My father served this country. My grandfather served this country. My husband served this country. My great-grandfather served this country. I could keep going because we have a lot of family that served in the military, but the point is, shall not be infringed. That's real. And so off we go to hour 2 on Stacy on the Right. Stay there. We'll be right back after these important messages.
Urban Family Talk.
This is Alex McFarland, and I urge you to attend the 2018 edition of Truth for a New Generation. Hear an amazing lineup, including Josh McDowell and much, much more. Don't miss Truth for a New Generation, March 23 and 24, Greensboro, North Carolina. You may register at truthforanewgeneration.com.
Presented in part by the American Family Association.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Ready, step. Ready, step.
President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump paid tribute to the Reverend Billy Graham today at the U.S. Capitol, where the evangelist body lay in honor. At a ceremony with congressional leaders and government officials, Trump talked of Graham's achievements and his rise to prominence as a religious leader.
We can only imagine the number of lives touched by the preaching and the prayers of Billy Graham, the hearts he changed, the sorrows he eased, and the joy he brought to so many. The testimony is endless.
The ceremony lasted about an hour. Graham's body will stay at the Capitol on today, with public visiting hours from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Trump and Pence will attend his funeral on Friday in Charlotte, North Carolina. President Trump is calling out his Attorney General again. John Decker has more.
President Trump tweeting, why is Attorney General Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse? Will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey. He continued, isn't the IG an Obama guy? Why not use Justice Department lawyers? Disgraceful, he wrote. President Trump and House Republicans have argued that the Obama administration used improperly obtained FISA warrants to spy on his transition team. Democrats on the House Intel Committee say that 4 Republican-appointed FISA judges approved each of the FISA warrants. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
Can you wear clothing with a certain logo or message to the polling place, or should your state be allowed to say no? Chris Woodward tells us more.
The Supreme Court will hear arguments today in the case of Minnesota Voters Alliance versus Manscaped. As we have told you on AFN, the issue is a Minnesota law that forbids voters from wearing what Minnesota calls any political badge, political button, or other political insignias, and at least 9 other states have similar laws. Dave Bremer is an attorney with Pacific Legal Foundation, the organization representing Minnesota Voters Alliance.
What we're really dealing with here is a statute in Minnesota that bans all political clothing and other apparel with any conceivable political group or saying conveyed on that apparel. And the opportunity for this law to suppress self-expression in polling places on election day is obvious. It covers all partisan references, issue-oriented material, all groups.
The case began in 2010 when Tea Party supporter Andy Selig went to vote in Minnesota and was told he could not wear a T-shirt with an image of the Gadsden flag and the Don't Tread on Me slogan.
There's no evidence that any polling place have ever been disrupted by this material or caused a fight or anything of that. It's purely a suppressive measure that inhibits free political association and expression, which is the entire purpose of the First Amendment. That is going to be the essence of our case before the Supreme Court.
I'm Chris Woodward.
A new federal report shows 25-year high levels of pedestrian deaths in the U.S. Jeff Manasso reports.
U.S. pedestrian deaths totaled nearly 6,000 in 2017 for the second straight year, and we all know why.
Everyone is glued to their cell phones, whether you're behind the wheel or on foot.
Though the Governor's Highway Safety Administration's Kara Masick says definitive data is hard to come by because people don't want to admit to distractions. Pedestrian fatalities also increased 16% in the 7 states and D.C., where recreational marijuana is legal, and decreased where it's not. The report also suggests to make sure people can see you, as 75% of pedestrian fatalities happen at night. In Chicago, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And the pace of Americans signing contracts to buy homes fell 4.7% in January to its lowest level in more than 3 years. The National Association of Realtors says its index of pending sales fell to 104.6, the lowest since October 2014. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
I'm Larry Nix. I'm very excited to announce that Defining Moments will be joining Urban Family Talk Thursday, March 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. Though Defining Moments will be the newest kid on the block, we've been considered as one of the most engaging, compelling, and empowering programs on radio. We talk to people from all ages, stages, and places, from all walks of life, backgrounds, and cultures about serious matters, life-altering encounters, second chances, and even how to move life forward. All in Defining Moments with Larry Nix, debuting Thursday, March 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Rahm Emanuel may be a Democrat in one of the most democratic cities in the world, but that doesn't mean he is popular there. The city of Chicago is falling apart in a lot of ways. You may have read it is deeply in debt, over $50 billion in debt. There were 650 murders there last year. Most of the schools are genuinely terrible. You would not send your own kids under any circumstances. So not surprisingly, polls of Chicago voters from last year showed Rahm Emanuel's approval rating at about 25%. And with numbers like that, there is no chance he will be reelected next year. But like a lot of unpopular Democrats, Rahm Emanuel has a plan to keep himself in power. If he can't win over existing voters, and he hasn't been able to, he can create new ones. Chicago is rolling out a new government ID card called City Key. A few months ago, Emanuel explained that City Key is intended to bring illegal immigrants, quote, out of the shadows. City Key is designed to thwart federal law enforcement. The cards don't store personal information. ICE can't use them to enforce federal law, and that's intentional. Now, Chicago has announced that these cards, which were designed for illegal aliens, can be used for voter registration. In other words, non-citizen illegals will be able to vote in the city of Chicago, including in federal elections that affect you. Now, that's illegal. Congress passed a law against it. It's explicitly illegal, and yet the city is encouraging it.
And so welcome back to the second hour of Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. 866-963-2037. Call lines are wide open for you. I want to point to just what in the world is Tucker Carlson talking about right there. What did he say? So they're getting something called a city card, and that card also helps them to register to vote. And when they register to vote, they're illegal aliens, but they'll get to vote. So remember, last year, the Democrats spent the first part of the year, first 6 months, mocking anyone who said there was voter fraud in this country. They're actually basically enshrining voter fraud into law by saying our way of getting around the legalization of all of these people we want to be legal is to just give them cards that also give them the right to register to vote. If you're illegal, and you need a card in order to do business around, like the city card would enable them to maybe check books out of the library. It just verifies their identity, gives the city a mechanism by which to tax them, all kinds of different things that liberals say they want to do with illegal aliens. Everything except make them legal the traditional way, which is get in the back of the line and come back in. Now they also would get the ability to register to vote. So it's not like, it just defies all logic that this is what liberals think is okay. So no borders, no laws, no respect of people like me. I'm a citizen of this country. I have a right to vote. Every illegal that votes dilutes my vote. Those illegals will vote for Democrats. They will tip the results of national elections. So that means my vote won't count as much because illegals will be voting, and they'll be voting against my best interests: limited government, lower taxes, less government intrusion. Why would I want more government when I look at Parkland and Broward County and how Democrats control all of that, and it's a failure? No wonder everybody wants to talk about the NRA. If I failed like that, I would want to talk about something else too. Am I right? So let's listen to the remainder of this. It's obviously it's Tucker Carlson. He's on his show and he's breaking this news that they're going to be able to vote. And so here's illegal voting too.
But there is a significant difference between ignoring voter fraud, which is wrong, and abetting it, which is horrifying. Authorities in Chicago want ineligible voters to vote. Rahm Emanuel wants to get reelected. If it takes illegals to do so, fine, whatever it takes. The Justice Department, for some reason, doesn't seem to be doing anything about any of this. And it's not just happening in the city of Chicago. In the state of California, illegal immigrants get driver's licenses, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of them, and they can use those to register to vote, and some doubtless do. In the state of Maryland, some towns are trying to legalize voting for illegal immigrants. How long until that's a Democratic Party platform plank? How long until some federal judge in, Hawaii declares that preventing illegal aliens from voting is racist and demands they get the vote immediately nationwide? It's coming. Of course it is. The left wants power, and this will give it to them.
And that's the real story here. When we get distracted talking about the NRA, we're not talking about this story that he is just breaking on his program on Fox News, which is a complete and utter, it's like crazy town. It's like alternative universe time. If you had said to the founding fathers or people who were Democrats 50 years ago or 30 years ago that their party would be advocating for people who have broken federal immigration law and are in the country illegally to have the right to vote, you'd have been laughed out of the conversation, out of the room. The founders would have said, you obviously don't know America. And this isn't the same America, let's face it. But does the law still mean anything? When I hear people talk about how the government is not being held accountable, and then I hear in the same breath, same individuals advocating for stuff like this, well, we know why the government's not being held accountable. Now, I must admit, I am absolutely flummoxed by the lack of accountability coming from Governor Rick Scott, who is a Republican, towards the corruption that we see en masse in Broward County. It seems like as governor, he would be able to do something. And again, Broward County, Florida, we're talking about an area that is heavily populated by people who moved there, a ton of them. They moved there from liberal states where they were fleeing high taxation and corruption. States like New York. You know, when New Yorkers get older and they've earned enough money and their wealth attainment is up there, then they buy a place in Florida and they start living there for part of the year. And then part of the year becomes the majority of the year, and then they sell their assets in New York and they move down to Florida permanently. And so the state has been trending. It's been going from a solid blue state or solid red state to a purple state. And now you see huge population areas like Broward County with, it's Democrats in charge up and down. And so what would be wrong with Democrats saying this? People died. There's failure here. We want to hold people accountable. He's got to go. We want him removed. We want him recalled. We want him impeached, whatever the procedure is for removing a sheriff. Why wouldn't these people who are grieving from the loss of these children and these people, these young adults, why wouldn't someone say, you know what, this is a bridge too far. We got to hold these people accountable? No one will answer that question. I don't see any Democrats saying, he's got to go. I don't see anyone of any consequence. You know what? Let's just take Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's her district. You would think she would have gotten behind the microphone and said, I'm a Democrat, but I'm also a mom. I'm a wife. I've got kids. This has to stop. I no longer support the Promise Program, and I think the sheriff should go. Not only could all of us respect her for saying that, but it would be the right thing for her to do. Because sometimes you have to do the right thing in spite of the fact that you're not going to get kudos for it, or people aren't going to come alongside you and say, I like what you did there. In fact, that's the adult thing to do. So yes, we all have our ideologies. Yes, we have our left, right, center, moderate, no politics. We have those paradigms that we operate in. But what about the good, honest truth? What about the good, right thing to do? Which in this case is to stop talking about how much you care about the victims and actually show that you care about them by holding someone accountable. Or you could just sit around and twiddle your thumbs and talk about laws that will not stop shootings and talk about, the NRA. Because, it seems like people have some kind of an obsession with the group, which, again, a sliver of law-abiding gun owners. The estimate is that 71 million Americans own guns. And so we're talking about 5.5 million people that, totally had something to do with Parkland. Yeah. That doesn't even make any sense. So there's that, but there's a little bit of good news. I want to get into this good news right here. 20 state AGs contend Obamacare is unconstitutional, and they've launched a new lawsuit. Fred Lucas is reporting about this over at the Daily Signal. And remember, it was just, I don't know how many years ago it was that the individual mandate was upheld in the Supreme Court. And it was called a tax and therefore upheld and by the Supreme Court of the United States of America. And so now you've got 20 attorneys general from states across the country who are challenging the law again because they want it tossed. You've got Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, Wisconsin Attorney General Brad Schemmel. They were joined by colleagues from across the country, and they made this announcement Tuesday at the Heritage Foundation. Now, this is it right here, you guys, because remember, we were told, and I remember sitting on conference calls with hundreds of people across the country, and this was after the individual mandate was upheld by the Supreme Court. The conference calls were about next steps. What do we do? This is unconstitutional, but it's been upheld by the Supreme Court. What do we do? And experts came on these calls and said, look, the thing is, this is the Supreme Court basically saying that this is an issue for Congress. This is an issue for voters, that they're not going to fix the problem that was created by this. And so, if that's the case, then what you have to do is you have to do exactly that, which is what these attorneys general are trying to do. So Congress has already voted to do away with the health care law's individual mandate as a part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was a tax reform package, the tax cut package that we just saw signed into law by President Trump. So in a 5-4 decision back in 2012, I just said I didn't know, here it is, 2012, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the ACA, Affordable Care Act. And they did so primarily on the basis that penalties from the individual mandate were legal under Congress's authority to tax. So the law, according to Paul Larkin, who's a senior legal research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Paul Larkin says, quote, the law became unconstitutional when they took out the penalty. So that's pretty important. So in addition to Arkansas, Wisconsin, and Texas, the other states involved are Alabama, Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Louisiana, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, and West Virginia. So my state. Awesome. So the administration, the Trump administration has not yet reacted to the lawsuit. And several, according to Schemmel, several of us have actually been in meetings with various Trump administration officials over the last few days. So they're still making the rounds and gathering their support. And they asked, the Trump administration officials they spoke with asked, do you have anything else? And we informed them in about an hour and a half, we're going to be suing you. They obviously were not in a position to have a reaction at that time. They're still assessing the lawsuit. We didn't coordinate coming into it. So they just came in strong. And that's, I like it. I like it. So the attorneys general say the Obamacare law imposes rising costs on consumers and gives vast power to the federal government, contending in most states prices more than doubled from 2013 through 2017, while 70% of U.S. counties have only one or two health insurers. Now, we've covered this on the show before, and you'll have to go back into the podcast list at urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy if you want to go back to those programs where we went through the different states that have had increases in the cost. The different states that have only not two insurers, one. You go into the Obamacare exchange and you don't have a choice. You have one insurer who is offering you a plan, and it's 200% higher than what you were paying before. Remember, we were promised, and we went over that on a show as well, all the promises President Obama made in conjunction with Obamacare. We played audio of him making those claims. I went down a list of the biggest lies President Obama told about Obamacare. And the reason why we did all of that, for posterity, for the podcast's sake, and also so you can go back and access it, and because it's the truth, that he lied about this, that he told Americans they'd save $2,500 a month, they'd have total access, total choice, they'd keep their doctor if they like their doctor, they'd keep their plan if they like their plan, and all of that has turned out to be false. And so again, lack of accountability. President Obama was never held accountable by that. He was never, ever brought to the carpet or brought onto 60 Minutes or Fox News and queried in a very hard-hitting way about why he lied about that. Why did he do that? Well, we know why he did it, because he wanted to pass the bill. So again, let's major in the right things and, minor in the minor things. And so if we put a hierarchy up of all of the different issues we're facing, there's a piece by Ann Coulter that we haven't gotten to this yet, and it's a part of the discussion on the Parkland shooting. And really, if we're talking about the hierarchy of things and what's important and what we should be paying attention to, Ann Coulter she's reporting in her latest column from last week that the reason why the FBI is so disjointed and they're now missing flags and different things that they should be catching, such as the Pulse nightclub shooting and that San Bernardino shooting in the office place, is because they're overtaxed. They're spending the majority of their resources on illegal aliens, prosecuting those crimes, chasing down ISIS, which is operating in all 50 states. So if we want to get our FBI back on to working on crime, domestic crime, we got to remove the onslaught of illegal aliens. And so when we see stories like this is more important than talking about the NRA. This is more important than talking about controlling guns. So is the discussion about Ann Coulter's column and what she's uncovered there. Majoring in what's important. Ignoring the deflections. We'll be back with more right after this. Stay there.
Hey, my name's Brant. You ever make a change and then wonder, why didn't I do this a long time ago? That's what's happening for thousands of people with regard to their health care. They're joining Medishare, and then they're wondering, why didn't I already do this? For most members, it costs less than half what they were paying for their old health plan. There's a huge provider network, too. You can customize your plan, and this is awesome, Medishare members can go online with a doctor 24/7. So if you need a prescription for the flu or something, it's so convenient for you and your family. So yeah, this is one of those why did I wait on this things. And if you don't love your current health plan, you're not stuck with it. You can join Medishare anytime. By the way, to give you an idea, the typical savings for a family, about $500 a month. It just makes so much sense. Check it out. They're super easy to talk to. Call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Earlier this month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions was criticized for using a term correctly and in the proper context. When he was speaking to the National Sheriff's Association, he reminded them that the office of sheriff is a crucial part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. The outrage surfaced almost immediately because he used the term Anglo-American. Let me quote from one U.S. Senator. He said, "Do you know anyone who says Anglo-American heritage in a sentence? What could possibly be the purpose of saying that other than to pit Americans against each other? For the chief law enforcement officer to use a dog whistle like that is appalling." It's hard to know what to make of this and many of the other comments on Twitter. Either these people are ignorant of our history, or more likely they jumped on the phrase to score political points against President Trump and Attorney General Sessions. In either case, let me provide a little education. The word sheriff actually is a combination of the word shire and reef. Sheriffs were important both in England, where much of law enforcement developed, and then in the United States. The Attorney General was quite proper in reminding the sheriffs gathered that they were part of the Anglo-American heritage of law enforcement. Charles Cook did all of us a service by digging up multiple times when Senator Barack Obama and President Barack Obama talked about the Anglo-American legal system and the foundation of Anglo-American law. These, of course, were never controversial and illustrates that the criticism of Attorney General Sessions was merely trying to score political points. We might also remind these critics that they enjoy so many constitutional rights because of our Anglo-American heritage. That includes the freedom of speech that gives them the freedom to say such stupid things. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. StacyOnTheRight.com, at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. It's so good to be back with you today. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037. And you can go to urbanfamilytalk.com and take our poll questions and read the articles written over there by many of the hosts on this network. And it's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program, Bill Powell, Senior Washington Correspondent for Newsweek. Thank you, Bill, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So you are having some information for us about the latest sanctions on North Korea and the impacts that they might have.
Right. The sanctions issued late last week by Treasury significantly ratchet up the sanctions on North Korea, not only on the North Korean shipping industry, that is the way in which they get most of their imports and the way they ship their exports, but it also sanctions I believe the number is 9 foreign shipping lines who do business with North Korea. Now, the Trump administration characterized these sanctions as the heaviest to date, and the fact is they do arguably significantly increase the pressure on North Korea, but they are not in any sense a game changer, in particular because the still gaping loophole in truly trying to cut off trade with North Korea remains China.
So, yeah, because I've been reading stories about how they are able to turn off the beacons on the ships so that there's not a way to accurately track where the ships are going or who they're meeting. And so they're able to get the cargo, and they're still able to do trade even though the sanctions are in effect. It's very difficult. It's very difficult business to identify the ships, identify the cargo that's on board. What it requires is extraordinarily good, not only signals intelligence or eye in the sky sort of intelligence, but also human intelligence at the ports where the goods are loaded or offloaded. What the administration, I think, is thinking about, and there's support on both sides of the aisle on Capitol Hill for this, is a significant increase in the funding for, and therefore the pace of activity in so-called interdiction efforts. That is at sea interdiction of North Korean imports and exports, jumping on board ships that are suspected of illicit trade, and searching those ships and confiscating the contraband if that's in fact what it turns out. It is not, but as you say, Stacy, it is not easy. But a lot of folks who have been very worried about the loose talk
from the administration about the so-called bloody nose strategy, which would be a sort of a preemptive, limited military strike against North Korea, are all of a sudden looking around and saying, look, there are other ways to try to significantly ratchet up the pressure on the regime there, and this is one of them.
So I know one of the things that they were attempting to do, North Korea was trying to improve their image internationally by attending the Olympics and coming down, to South Korea. But instead, I think it suffered some really strong PR hits because they had the cheerleaders there, and then it was covered in the news that 20 of the cheerleaders were sent to gulags after returning and talking about what they saw in South Korea and the stark differences in the way they live and how basically South Korea is so modern and so rich, and they're not. And so do you think that any of the activity that we're seeing with them now is kind of an offshoot to the embarrassments that they experienced at the Olympics?
I don't think necessarily that it's a follow-on from the Olympics. I think they are. I think what they are hoping, and this is still in play, is that President Moon of South Korea will ultimately accept the invitation that Kim Jong-un extended through his younger sister at the South Korean Olympics, and that he will visit Pyongyang for a summit meeting. I know the folks here in Washington were somewhat relieved by how President Moon handled that invitation, which was expected. He said, yes, I'd love to come, something to the effect of when the conditions are right. And that's the answer that everyone wanted to hear. The U.S. itself has said that it's not completely averse to talking as long as everything is on the table for discussions. So I'm not sure there's a significant impact one way or the other from the visit of the North Korean delegation to the South for the Olympics. They were trying to create an intra-Korean feel-good moment. They succeeded in that for what that was worth. The longer-term political benefits of that to the North, I think, are very limited.
Yeah. So what would you, if you had your way and you could tell President Trump, look, this is what you have to do, what would you recommend that he do on this front of the sanctions? Is there a way to make them more impactful, to give them more teeth, or is it just that the nature of shipping makes it impossible for the sanctions to be really effective, or is it really that we need China to take the lead on reining in North Korea?
Yeah, alas, I unfortunately, I wish this were not the case, but I do think it is the latter. I think that China is and has always been critical, a critical player to certainly the economic health of that regime, and it is possible with Chinese and to a lesser extent Russian cooperation to execute what amounts to a strangulation strategy. I mean, it's hard, and people, that is, the citizens of North Korea would suffer. But I think that's sort of the only way that one can move toward a regime change scenario, by incentivizing some senior figures in the military in Pyongyang to say, all right, look, we got to cut our losses here, and even though that might mean an end to the dynastic regime, an end to the Kim regime, we have to do something. Without China's help, I mean, look, China can basically cut off the energy flow to North Korea. Okay, that's what this comes down to, and China is not willing to do that for a variety of reasons. So then the question becomes for Washington: well, how tough a game are we willing to play relative to Beijing, and are we going to incorporate more sanctions on Chinese companies that do business with North Korea? And more broadly, will we factor that into our overall trade policy toward the North, which has some very critical decisions to be made this year in terms of how the United States is going to respond to intellectual property theft, alleged dumping of steel and aluminum, and a whole host of other specific trade complaints. Everyone for decades has wished there was a magic bullet, but that question you asked is a very good one. And the problem is, and has always been, and alas will continue to be, there just aren't any easy answers.
Yeah, I think that's something that is becoming patently evident. So we have Donald Trump, who has a kind of radically different strategy for almost everything, whether it's foreign policy, domestic policy, et cetera, from his predecessor. And so the natural thought is, oh, well, he's going to be radically different. He'll get a different result. But the issue with North Korea is so thorny because of the China factor and the kind of, it's almost an intransigence that exists within that dictatorship and the regime, where they don't really care if there are sanctions. They don't care about any of the things that would normally move a country to be more cooperative. And that makes it really difficult for our leadership to figure out a way forward. But anyway, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and explain these things to us. It's hard to kind of get a grip on North Korea. It's really hard to understand them, and I appreciate the work that you're doing for Newsweek and as senior Washington correspondent for them. Thank you so much for coming on today, Bill.
Thank you, Stacy. My pleasure.
All right, talk to you again soon. Have a great day. I know we sometimes we have the guests come on and we talk about the Middle East, we talk about North Korea. It's important to stay informed on it, and it's hard for me to understand because in my mind, there's got to be some part of Kim Jong-un who wants to see his people because he considers them all to be his people. He even has an approved list. Interesting fact. Kim Jong-un has an approved list of haircuts that the people who live in North Korea can have, the men and the women. They're only allowed those haircuts. He chooses the haircuts that make him look good. Now, I know they're all Korean, but they don't all look identical. They don't all look identical to him. So you would think he would let them have whatever hairdo they want. But that's the kind of command and control this man exercises. So you would think he would say, I want everyone to have good nutrition. I want everyone to do well. But in order to do that, the best mechanism for providing that kind of, basic providing for people's basic needs is capitalism or some form of a capitalistic type of a system. And he's a communist. So he wants to control everybody, but he doesn't care if they're fed. He doesn't care if they have their everyday needs met. And he wants everyone to say good things about him, regardless of what their true living conditions are. And so we just have to be really grateful that we live here. And with all the problems that we have, at least, obviously we get to decide what kind of haircuts we have, but we also have access to food and water and clean living conditions. And largely how we live and exist is driven by our own decision making. And I know there are people who are listening right now who are they're ticked. Well, she said, if you're poor, it's your own fault. I didn't say that. I'm saying that we live in the greatest place on earth with which to exert effort on your own to not be poor or to not be middle class, to be upper class, or for people who are wealthy. Little known fact, Thomas Sowell wrote about it in a number of his books, how malleable our upper class is, how many people in the upper class literally they move in and out of it based on economic conditions and decisions that they make with their businesses, with their lives, with their marriages. One of the number one indicators of whether or not you will remain in your social strata is whether or not you get divorced. Yeah. So their decision making, it lies with us. So next segment, we're going to be listening to some audio from Trish Regan on Fox Business, because guess what? I'm sure if you've been watching the news and just working and not really digging out for your own kind of, information reporting, you didn't realize that the stock market has rebounded. I've even been getting text messages from family members. They're like, woohoo, we've gained all of our market share back on the stock market. And the Supreme Court just recently ruled, I believe it was yesterday, that the Supreme Court ruled that immigrants, illegal aliens, can be detained indefinitely. Even immigrants who have permanent residency can be detained indefinitely. So this is an interesting ruling from them, really, honestly. It's fascinating, really, especially since they just ruled also that President Trump, they basically refused to hear a case that said that President Trump couldn't end DACA, which again, how could he not end a program that was started with the pen and the phone of his predecessor? How is that not something they should have heard? So maybe they're backlogged or they're overburdened, or I don't know. I don't know what the cause of them not hearing it might be, but they decided not to hear it. So we'll be listening to those two pieces of audio, and I'll be taking your calls next segment. The call lines are open at 866-963-2037. Also, I wanted to let you guys know, please tune into Fox Business tonight. I'll be on Making Money with Charles Payne with a couple of other pundits and talking about different things having to do with the Parkland shooting and the students going back to school for a half a day today. So today was their day to go back into the building, and they were accompanied by 50 armed officers, and they had support dogs and counselors on hand to work with the students. And there were a lot of makeshift memorials that are there at the buildings. And the building where the shooting occurred, that building is closed. And a lot of people have made calls publicly for that building to be demolished and for a memorial to be erected there to the people who lost their lives. And so there's just a lot going on. And so we'll be unpacking all of that and taking some calls from the listeners. You guys are awesome. 866-963-2037. So we'll be right back with more after these messages.
Life is never picture perfect. Human beings come in all different shapes, sizes, colors, and abilities. No matter how much we plan, no matter how much we think we're prepared, the unplanned happens all the time. It's how we respond to the unexpected that shows our true humanity. But many do not see the value of every human life. Too many are willing to discard those who don't fit the picture of perfection. Abortion destroys the chance to love and to be loved. We never know what will fill the frames of our lives, or how empty those frames can be when we allow exceptions.
Every life is a gift.
Learn more at www.radiance.life.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
I'm Larry Nix. I'm very excited to announce that Defining Moments will be joining Urban Family Talk Thursday, March 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. Though Defining Moments will be the newest kid on the block, we've been considered as one of the most engaging, compelling, and empowering programs on radio. We talk to people from all ages, stages, and places, from all walks of life, backgrounds, and cultures about serious matters, life-altering encounters, second chances, and even how to move life forward. All in Defining Moments with Larry Nix, debuting Thursday, March 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. on Urban Family Talk.
Stacy Washington.
And so to this day, I don't eat green beans. If they bring me a plate of food at a restaurant and they've substituted green beans for some other vegetable because the other vegetable is out of season, I will make them bring me a saucer and remove the green beans from my plate and take them off of the table because I cannot abide green beans. And so Chuck Schumer and the Democrats have to sit down to the table and it's loaded up high with green beans, and they have to stay there until they've eaten them all. That's the table they set. They boiled the green beans, they picked them, they snapped them, they put them into the steamer, they've cooked them, they seasoned them with salt and pepper, and now they're on the table with a little side of butter, and that's all they're getting, and they're going to have to eat these until they win.
Stacy on the Right. Weekday afternoons at 2 Central on Urban Family Talk. This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Check out yesterday, by the way, the Dow closing up nearly 400 points. But I'll tell you, if you were watching the evening news, you would have had no idea about that. But you remember earlier in the month when we had tough days? Down days in the market? They devoted 23 minutes to the sell-off that you saw. But in the last 2 weeks, when the markets have actually been doing really well, we're talking 38 seconds. That's how much time they spend on good news.
It's not surprising that the media does this. It doesn't fit into their agenda. I get that. Every station has their own DNA. But you hit it on the head. I mean, the market was up 400 points. They barely covered it. The market goes down 1,500 points. It dominates the news cycle. So it's just the unfortunate part of the mainstream media.
Now, part of that is, it's a little bit of the plane crash scenario, right? When the market's down 1,500, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's a little bit, unfortunately, for the mainstream media and certainly these evening news shows, bad news is news that they think people will turn into.
Oh, wow. So, yeah, the problem that we have is one of the biggest, I think it's a paramount issue, and that is that most people still watch, some regular television. They go to their local nightly news. They watch some national TV. And so when the Dow experienced a correction, it was just, people were treating it like it was, the sky was on fire. But when the market was high, when they had the record of, 5,000 points in 1 year gained by the stock market, when things, any good news, that was basically, 30 seconds here, 4 seconds there, a brief mention, and then move right on. So Americans weren't given a taste of that. But then as soon as there's a correction, oh my goodness, they spent hours on it. They spent hours talking about like the sky was literally on fire or falling or both. And Americans were treated to that whole kind of, it just didn't make any sense. So it's important for us to celebrate the fact that the market has rebounded. Profit taking is over. Some people made a whole lot of money. And off we go. It could correct itself again. That's what it does. It was not a horror when it was happening a few weeks ago. People saw losses in their portfolios, but now they should have seen those losses restored because the market is back up. So anyway, we then next have this Supreme Court ruling that the immigrants can be detained indefinitely. And this is clip 5.
Immigrants can be held by U.S. immigration officials indefinitely without receiving bond hearings, even if they have permanent legal status or are seeking asylum, the Supreme Court ruled Tuesday. NPR reports that the court ruled 5-3 with Justice Elena Kagan recusing that immigrants do not have the right to periodic bond hearings. The ruling is a defeat for immigration advocates who argued that immigrants should not be held for more than 6 months at a time without such a hearing. The Supreme Court ruling follows a Trump administration appeal of a ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals last year that imposed a rule requiring immigrants held in custody be given a bond hearing every 6 months as long as they aren't considered a flight risk or a danger to national security.
So, excuse me, part of the reason why it's so difficult to give the bond hearings every 6 months is because that requires an attorney to be present, and then they have to schedule that time on the docket. And our immigration courts are so backlogged because we have such a huge number of people who are here illegally, and because coordinating the efforts for adjudicating their cases, it's Herculean. And so that brings us to a place where they're just trying to figure out a way to streamline things so that they can try to manage it. It's just crazy. So I wanted to talk a little bit more, pivoting back to the story about the kids And it's tough. They just went back to school today. And so I asked for people in the listening audience, don't forget to say a prayer over the kids who are going back to the Parkland high school. They'll be back in school tomorrow again, and trying to return to and resume some normalcy. Some of the kids they spoke to, the news media did some interviews. Some of them said they were terrified until they got in the building, and then they saw their friends again, and they walked around and they regained a sense of normalcy. And so we have to pray that these kids would, that God would work in their lives, and that that all of this would be worked out for their good, and that more of them would come to know not just Christ, but that there would be an atmosphere among them where they have unity and they have peace, and that they would start to demand some accountability of the police and law enforcement officials in their area. So it just, try to remember to keep them in your prayers. And then there's also the story about Dick's Sporting Goods. So I don't know if you guys saw this today. Dick's Sporting Goods is actually a retailer, one of the places where the Parkland shooter purchased a firearm. He liked to shop, I guess. He bought firearms from more than one place. And so Dick's Sporting Goods is saying their chief executive, Ed Stack, put an open letter on their website and announced that they are no longer going to sell assault style weapons. Now this is just, so apparently on their main stores, they haven't sold the assault style weapons in 6 years anyway. But whenever they did sell them, they sold a wide variety of weapons, including AR-15s. So they're removing assault-styled weapons, their words, from their Dick's branded stores, and they'd removed some of them after the 2012 shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Today's move takes them out of their 35 Field and Stream outlets as well, and makes the move permanent. So apparently, according to analysts, the 2012 decision did not hurt their retail sales, and that's why they have confidence in making this move right now. As I've pointed out numerous times during the course of this show, the firearms industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and one retailer saying they're not going to sell a certain type of firearm is not going to prevent people who want to purchase those guns from being able to purchase them. And any person who thinks that, getting Delta to end their discount with the NRA, or getting retailers to not sell these firearms, that somehow they're impacting the bottom line, doesn't understand. You don't understand the trade. You don't understand access. And so even those who believe that if we just had an assault weapons ban, that those firearms wouldn't be used in killings, you also don't understand access. The access is already there, and the saturation point has been achieved, so that unless you were to mobilize the National Guard and bring all of the troops home from all over the world, bring the Navy ships into ports around the continental United States, and deploy every active duty service member and activate the reserves, and go door to door across this country to confiscate the firearms, that's the only way you're going to change the level of access to guns that currently exists. And in doing so, that would be our second civil war. Not because of me. This isn't me talking like I'm predicting something because that's what I've dreamed up in my mind or that's what I want. That is what it takes to disarm America. And so that's why the discussion is so moot and so ridiculous. That is why it makes no sense for people to waste their time advocating for gun control. We've already had certain levels of gun control in this country, and they don't yield the result that they intend. The unintended consequence of all of these things is it makes guns more readily accessible to criminals and disarms law-abiding citizens. So, I notice, and I think you should look at it too, like check out online social media. Whenever people are talking about gun control and someone who is an advocate for the Second Amendment says, well, I've been threatened and I want to protect myself, they're always mocked. Did you hear how quickly our guest from the first hours, he went straight into laughing and discounting what my family and I have been through? And he really doesn't care anything about if they're kids that are attached to a conservative. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if it's me and I'm a woman. I'm one of the Democrats' favorite special interest groups. I'm black and I'm a woman. They don't care. They don't care if it's conservative women or if it's the children of conservative women. They don't care about the safety of those people. What they care about is people, nameless, faceless people in groups who've been victimized that they can use to advance their agenda. So do they really care about Parkland? No. Do they really care about the victims of Parkland? Only so far as they can be used to advance an agenda of, removing the platforms for the NRA's television, lowering their numbers, lowering the ability for people to enjoy NRA membership and have perks, and attaching all of this mayhem and destruction to President Trump. Did you hear anything in there that kind of goes along with what you're trying to get done as it pertains to, hey, I want to solve some problems. Hey, I want to do something that would prevent shootings. No, but there's a lot of virtue signaling going on. So, I'm tired of that. I am so tired of people going straight to emotions. Well, you just don't care about kids. But then when I bring up my kids, then they don't care. So who really doesn't care about kids? I mean, I was on a school board. I was responsible for, as a school board member, for making sure that policy matched up with the desires and wants of parents and that kids were kept safe. And as an elected official in that capacity, I did care about those kids. I felt responsible for that school district in my role as a school board member, but I wasn't the only one. There were 7 of us and the superintendent and the teachers, and we were all together in that. So I just don't think, when I hear the leftists talking about well, it's for the kids. And no, it's not. It's not for the kids. It's not even close to being for the kids. So just kind of think about that when you see them talking about this, when you hear them making these blanket statements about, well, why don't you talk to some of the victims? I have no problem talking to anyone about this. It's not about me avoiding talking to anyone. It's not about that at all. So I want to go to a story that's on thehill.com, and it's trending. People seem pretty upset about this. It's from today, and it is about President Trump making some comments at the White House. He says, and I'm quoting, he voiced supports for confiscating guns from certain individuals deemed to be dangerous, even if it violates due process rights. The president said, I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. To go to court would have taken a long time. Take the guns first, go through due process second. He was responding to comments from Vice President Pence that families and local law enforcement should have had more tools to report potentially dangerous individuals with weapons. And allow due process, this is Vice President Pence said, allow due process so no one's rights are trampled, but the ability to go to court and obtain an order and then collect not only the firearms but any weapons. And then President Trump said, or Mike, take the firearms first and then go to court. President Trump met with lawmakers on Wednesday to discuss gun laws and school safety in the aftermath of a February 14th shooting at a high school in Parkland, Florida that left 17 people dead. The thing is, you don't have to take the guns first, do due process later, if you follow all of the different warning signs. If any of the warning signs were heeded with Nicholas Cruz, this wouldn't be an issue. There would be no need to take firearms before there's due process. He was violent well before he ever did the school shooting. He gave all of the warning signs off. He had all of the classic hallmarks of someone who was planning on killing people. He'd already demonstrated those capacities. He was already under mental supervision with the high school. So, if you want to change any laws, change the law. If you're under psychiatric care and then you come to the age of majority and it becomes your decision to discontinue it, that should be something that local law enforcement is notified of and the NICS database. So a person who's under mental supervision or under psychiatric care, they're 17, they're forced to attend counseling by their high school, by the state, but then they turn 18 and they opt not to continue the counseling, then a recommendation should be made at that point as to whether or not they can own firearms. So the confiscation issue, again, it doesn't come into play. Involuntary commitment. What happened to that? I mean, there are so many other avenues for taking care of this rather than advocating for some form of confiscation. So I just don't understand that statement. I don't have the context of it except what's here on the Hill, so I'll have to wait and see how it develops. But I don't understand that. All right, and in other news, Hope Hicks has resigned from the White House. So, lots going on right now, including the end of the show. Watch for me on Fox Business tonight, and I'll see you online, stacyontheright.com. Be blessed, and I'll see you back here tomorrow.